Hello, my name is Matthew Wadstein, and welcome to the course, Your First Hour with Unreal Engine. In this course, we're going to go ahead and take a high-level look at Unreal Engine. We're going to introduce you to the basics of how it works, get you started with creating a small little project, and get you started into your journey with Unreal Engine. Now, the first place we're going to want to start is with our launcher. After you've downloaded the launcher, signed in, you should be presented with the screen we see here. Now, what we're primarily going to concern ourselves with is the Unreal Engine tab on the bottom left, which we can see here. There are additional tabs such as Home, Store, Library, and Friends. Those are mostly related to the store aspect of the launcher. If you don't actually want to see these, you can go down to Settings, and you can turn on Hide Game Library. That'll go ahead and hide everything but the Unreal Engine tab. Now, along the top, we have the sections inside of our Unreal Engine section. We have our home page, Unreal Engine, where we get some nice information, current goings-ons, and things that are happening inside of the Unreal Engine ecosystem. We also have some shortcuts to some common things like News, YouTube channel, and Answer Hub. Next to this is going to be our Learn tab along the top left. This is a great place to get started after you've watched this video. There's some quick starts, depending on what type of a person you are and what you want to do with the engine, as well as some samples and some projects that you can learn from. Next to this is going to be our marketplace. This is a great place to get free and paid assets for your project to accelerate the development time. If you're looking for something maybe to mess around with, there is a free tab, and you can find things like Epic Games supplied content, free for the month, and permanently free content. Our next tab is going to be our library tab, and this is where we're going to start the majority of our work. Along the top, we have the installed engine versions. So currently we can say I have 4.26.1 and 4.25.4. You can have as many engine versions installed as you'd like. You can click on the plus next to engine version to install a new one. You will choose which version of the engine you wish to install. In this case, I have 2.6 and 2.5 installed, so I can't install them again, but I can install older ones maybe for testing purposes. After you've done that, once you choose to install, it's going to ask you where you want to install it and how you want to install it. In our options, we have things like, do you want to include the starter content, templates, engine source? What type of platforms are you going to target? If you're going to go ahead and do the advanced options, maybe you want to save a little bit of space, go ahead and uncheck the platforms you're not going to use. But I would recommend keeping the starter content and the templates because they're a great way to accelerate your development. After it has been installed and it's done, you'll now have the launch button, as well as a quick launch in the top right, and that'll allow you to change the current version. If you no longer wish to have one installed, you can click the X to remove it, and it'll go ahead and install that version. Below this, we have the current projects you may have opened recently. In this case, I have one project waiting here, and we can see it's in version 4.26. And below this, we have our vault. This is where it stores all of the content that you've paid for or received from free from the marketplace. And you have the ability to search through the vault, install your engine if it's, say, a plugin, add to project if it's an additional project content, or create a new project. With that said, go ahead and launch your version of Unreal Engine that you'll be using for this course. At this time, 4.26.1 is what I'll be using, and that's what this course will be on. After you've launched it, we'll go ahead and take a look at creating our first project. After you've launched the version you're going to be using, you'll get the Unreal Project Browser. Now, similar to the launcher, we can see any recent projects we may have opened, but these are going to be specific to the version we've launched. Since I've launched .26, I wouldn't see any, for example, .25 files. If you wanted, you could click More, and you could browse to any specific project that you would like. In our case, since you're just starting, you haven't actually created a project, let's go ahead and create a new project using one of the templates. Now, there's various templates. We're going to go with the games template, and it's going to ask us, well, what specific game template do we want to start with? And the nice things, depending on the type of project you're going to make, these will quickly help you get started. For example, virtual reality template will give us some workable hands and some locomotion. Maybe we're working in AR. The handheld AR will give us the start we need for our Android or iOS AR. We're going to go with third person. We're going to click next to go to the next window. And now it's going to ask us for our basic settings. For our project, we're going to keep everything default here. So we're going to want a blueprint project, maximum quality, no ray tracing, targeting a desktop with no starter content. And the nice thing is all of these options are just the starting settings. We can adjust them later if we'd like. We can even add in more content if we choose not to right here. You're going to choose the location and the type of the name. We're going to go with our first project for the name of this. I'm going to put this in my eProjects folder. You can put this wherever you'd like, and I'll create a project. After a short bit of time, it's going to go ahead and create that project in the background. Depending on the speed of your machine, it could take between a few seconds to a couple minutes as it creates that project and sets it up for you. If you have any pop-ups, you can go ahead and dismiss them. At this point, we now have our basic project running inside of the editor using that third-person template. Now, before we actually get started, let's just see what we got. In the top right, we can click play. When we hit play, it plays our current project in the editor. If you're familiar with using a mouse and keyboard for playing a game, you should be able to navigate this and you should be able to basically run this project. If we click inside of our viewport, our mouse disappears. We can rotate our mouse left and right, up and down to look around our character and use the WASD keys to move forward, backwards, left, and right. And with the combination of the mouse and the keyboard, we can look around and move our character. We can run them up. And with the combination of the mouse and the keyboard, the WASD keys to move forward, backwards, left, and right. Right, up and down to look around our character. And use the WASD keys to move forward, backwards, left, and right. And with the combination of the mouse and the keyboard, we can look around and move our character. We can run them up the stairs. We can even fall off. You'll notice there's a jumping animation. Or we push the space bar. We can look around and move our character. We can run them up the stairs. We can even fall off. You'll notice there's a jumping animation. Or we push the space bar. We can jump and fall off of items. When you're done playing in your preview, go ahead and hit escape, and it'll bring us back out. So that's how we navigated and we used our character that is inside of our project once we started it. But now that we're in the editor, how do we actually move around? How do we use our editor? Well, you have similar keys. If we hold down the right mouse button inside of our viewport is the window we can see here in the middle where we can see our project. Holding the right mouse button will allow us to look around, similar to basically if we were on a pole and rotating a camera. Holding the left mouse button and doing the same thing moves our character. We can rotate him left and right, and we can push it forward or backwards with the mouse. Now, if we combine those mouse keys, let's say the right mouse button, with the WASD keys like we used before to move our character, we're actually moving an invisible flying camera. So we can go forwards, backwards, left, and right with the WSAD keys, or the Q and the E, actually moving an invisible flying camera. Like we used before to move our, say, the right mouse button. With the WASD keys, like we used before to move our character, we're actually moving an invisible flying camera. So we can go forward, left and right, and we can push it forward or backwards with the mouse. Now, if we combine those mouse keys, let's say the right mouse button, with the WASD keys, like we used before to move our character, we're actually moving an invisible flying camera. So we can go forwards, backwards, left, and right with the WSAD keys, or the Q and the E key will move our camera down and up. Keep in mind this is holding the right mouse button. When I let go of the right mouse button, we now have camera down and up. Or the Q and the E key will move our camera down and up. Keep in mind this is holding the right mouse button. When I let go of the right mouse button, we now have our arrow back to select items. Like I can select my floor or my wall. And the WASD keys won't allow us to move when we're not holding down the right mouse button. If we hold the left and use the WASD, the character will move similarly. We just can't rotate our camera up and down. And that's the basics of flying around or navigating inside of our viewport. But let's say we want to actually do it a little bit quicker. If we click on an item and we want to go view that item, we could use our arrow keys and our right mouse button and try to locate it. Or we can use the F, which stands for focus, and it will focus on the item and bring it into our viewport. So now we have this item, but we don't like where it's at. We want to move it. Every item we have selected will have a little transform widget. By clicking on one of the arrows, it'll highlight it in yellow, and we can then left click and drag in that direction. So let's say I want this cube to move to the right. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to left click and hold on that green arrow, which is now yellow, and drag it to the right. And now we can have it on the right. Or if I move it back, we can move it back. Same thing with up and down, or with the red arrow, we'll move it in this direction. So that's the basics of moving items with your transform widget. You can not only move items, but you could also rotate them and scale them. Along the top of our viewport, we have our little shortcuts. Right now we're in the select and translate or move. Next to this is rotate and scale. So if we click rotate, we get a different transform widget, selecting and dragging any one of these axes. So the blue one, the green, right now we're in the select and transform widget. You can not only move items, but you could also rotate them and scale them. Along the top of our viewport, we have our little shortcuts. Right now we're in the select and translate or move. Next to this is rotate and scale. So if we click rotate, we get a different transform widget, selecting and dragging any one of these axes. So the blue one, the green one, or the red one will turn yellow. We can rotate along that axis. Same thing with scaling. We can scale in one direction or another. By default, you're going to find it's going to be scaling in world or local, which is right here next to it. If we wanted to move an item based on the way it is angled now, we might want to change it from world, which means up in the world is always going to be up, to local, and now we will move that item on its up instead of the world's up. As we are moving these items, you may notice they don't exactly move very smoothly. The reason for that is we have snapping enabled. Now you can enable or disable snapping for both movement, rotation, and scaling with these yellow and orange icons here. Or you can change the amount that they snap with the snap dropdown. Now, in addition to the viewport, we have all of the other windows that we can see around them. As we've been moving items around, we can see that we have information here on the top right, our world outliner. And our world outliner tells us everything that's inside of our world. We could click on any of them to select that they snap with the snap and scaling with these yellow and orange icons here. Or you can change the amount that they snap with the snap dropdown. Now, in addition to the viewport, we have all of the other windows that we can see around them. As we've been moving items around, we can see that we have an item based on the way it is angled now. We might want to change it from world, which means up in the world is always going to be up, to local, and now we will move that item on its up instead of the world's up. As we are moving these items, you may notice they don't exactly move very smoothly. The reason for that is we have snapping enabled. Now you can enable or disable snapping in one direction based on the way it is angled now. We might want to change it from world, which means up in the world is always going to be up, to local, and now we will move that item on its up instead of the world's up. As we are moving these items, you may notice they don't exactly move very smoothly. The reason for that is we have snapping enabled. Now you can enable or disable snapping for both movement, rotation, and scaling with these yellow and orange icons here. Or you can change the amount that they snap with the snap dropdown. Now, in addition to the viewport, we have all of the other windows that we can see around them. As we've been moving items around, we can see that we have information here on the top right, our world outliner. And our world outliner tells us everything that's inside of our world. We could click on any of them to select them. Let's say we wanted to find this wall. We could click on it, F to focus, and now we can see our wall with our movement widget. Any information about that item will be down here in our details panel, such as transform, what type of item it is, and a material maybe. Or if we have a light selected, it's going to give us information that they snap with the snap dropdown. Now, in addition to the viewport, we have all of the other windows that we can see around them. As we've been moving items around, we can see that we have information here on the top right, our world outliner. And our world outliner tells us everything that's inside of our world. We could click on any of them to select them. Let's say all of the other windows that we can see around them. As we've been moving items around, we can see that we have information here on the top right, our world outliner. And our world outliner tells us everything that's inside of our world. We could click on any of them to select them. Let's say we wanted to find this wall. We could click on it, F to focus, and now we can see our wall with our movement widget. Any information about that item will be down here in our details panel, such as transform, what type of item it is, and a material maybe. Or if we have a light selected, it's going to give us information about the light, like maybe its color and how bright it is. At the bottom, we have the content browser. This is basically the content that is inside of our project and that we can work with. So if we go inside of here, we can see we have a blueprints folder, a maps folder, and then this item called third person overview. We can double click on any of these folders to go inside of them. At the top, we have a little breadcrumb trail to go back, content folder being the base. Or if you'd like, this little pop-up right here called show or hide the sources panel will actually give us a more file explorer like view. We can see we have a structure here. We could go back into our map and we could go into our geometry folder, meshes, and we see a few default meshes, and we could drag a cube out and drop it into our world. And you'll see it's going to create these items in our world. You'll notice this item didn't go in because this is not a mesh. This is a material or an item we can put on a mesh to make it look a certain way. But items that can go in our world, like these static meshes, we can just drag and drop like this. We could even go into our third person blueprints folder, and we could add more characters like that. Now, if you were to play test this, it's probably not going to work the exact way you want, but this is just an example of how you would put content into your viewport or your level from your content browser. And at the top left, we have our place actors window. This is commonly used items, like we have basic and we have maybe cubes. We could drag a sphere or two in here and move them around and position them. Same with like a cylinder, and we can position, we can resize, and we can start designing a basic level with these built-in items. Lastly, along the top, we have our main toolbar. This is where we commonly access some common things like, well, different types of modes. Maybe we want to work with landscape or painting meshes. Maybe we want to build out special things like our lighting. You'll notice when I click on this little drop down next to the button. That gives me an advanced menu. Clicking on the button itself will do an action like, for example, building everything, or play, which plays everything. Play menu also has other options, like maybe we want to test it in a new window, or try it out on a mobile device if we're going to be doing that. After you've launched the version you're going to be using, you'll get the Unreal project browser. Now, similar to the launcher, we can see any recent projects we may have opened, but these are going to be... If you've been working with the project so far, you may have a map that's kind of a giant mess. And that's fine. You're experimenting, you're playing, you're enjoying it. We also haven't saved anything yet. If you were to go to File, you have options to save. So you can save current, which saves our current level, or the container that holds all of our stuff. You can save current as, which saves the current level as a different name. Maybe you want to make a duplicate. Or you could save all the levels, or you could do save all. Now, save all saves all unsaved levels and assets. So if we've made any changes to anything, it'll save those changes. But in the meantime, if we were to go into our maps and we look at third-person example map, you notice there's a star next to it. That indicates there's a change that hasn't been saved. So if we wanted to, we could actually double-click on this map again, and it's going to say, hey, do you want to save the content that's been changed? In this case, it's our map. And if we don't save it, since we were telling it to open this map, now you notice the map no longer has any changes, and we're back to our default map. So it's a great way to undo any changes you may have wanted to do, or if you're just exploring. Now that we're back with our default map, how do we add more content? Well, if we go to the Add Import button, we have some options. These are for creating built-in types or classes, things that the engine could create for us, like maybe some sound types or animation types. But at the top, we have Add Feature or Content Pack. If we click on that, we're presented with any features. These are basically templates that we can bring in after we've created a project, or content packs, which are provided packs of content from Epic. In this case, we have our starter content. If we were to add to project, it's going to bring it in. And now we can see inside of our folder here, starter content. And this gives us some nice items to start making a basic level from. For example, if we were to go to Maps, Starter Map, you can see an example of everything it comes with. We get some textures, we get some sounds, we get some things like a chair and a table. There's some particle effects. It's a great way to get started. That's why it's starter content. But in addition, you could do Add Feature Content Pack again. Maybe we wanted not only a third person, but we wanted a vehicle in here. You could add the vehicle template, so blueprint feature vehicle, and now we will have a vehicle map. If we were to go into there, and now we have a map that we can use that has a vehicle, and we could maybe add our third person to it, and we can combine things. Now, in addition to that, we have our marketplace. I'm going to go ahead and open up my launcher. Inside of our launcher, at the top, we have our marketplace tab. And inside of our marketplace, we have content that is provided by Epic Games. Now we have paid third-party content and then content from Epic themselves. Let's go ahead and look at adding something from Epic. We're going to go to Free Epic Games Content, and you should find Unreal Learning Kit Games. If you don't, we can always search for products, and we'll look for Unreal Learning. And it should give us back the Unreal Learning Kit Games. What we're going to do is click on this. We're going to see it comes with a bunch of things. By things, I mean we get a character, we get some assets, we get some blueprints, some particle effects, some animations, all ready for us to use. Go ahead and choose free. This will go ahead and add it to your shopping cart. And it's going to add it to your account. Now, if we were to go back to our library, we could find the Unreal Learning Kit and create a new project. But since we're already here, let's go ahead and create a new project. We're going to create a new project. It's going to ask you where to put it. I'm going to put it with the rest of my items. So it's going to be inside of my E drive projects. We're going to go ahead and call this one Unreal Learning Kit Games. That's going to be the default name for it. And create it. Now, after a little bit of time, it's going to go ahead and download the content, create a new project for you. And as soon as it's done, we're going to look at that new project. At this point, our project has been downloaded and created, but we don't see it. Well, if we go back to our library, we'll find our library has been updated. Not only do we have our first project, which is the project we've been working on, we have the Unreal Learning Kit, which is what we just downloaded. Now, this is how we can create a new project from our marketplace, and it gives us access to this content. But let's say we wanted the content from this project in a different one. So let's look at migrating. I'm going to go ahead and open up this project so that way we have the learning kit, which is where we're going to. After a short bit of time, your project should load up. Now it may let you know that it's compiling shaders, or it may give you some other errors. Wait for the shaders to finish compiling and dismiss the errors. And now we have our learning kit project loaded up. And we can use our normal navigation controls and look around, and we can see we have some animations and some pieces to build, some props. We have a nice little setup. If we were to hit play, it's going to go into our character, and our character can run around, very similar to the third-person character in our test project. He can jump. We have this nice little animated character we could use. Now, what we're primarily concerned about is we want the majority of this content. We want this little test map, we want these items, and we want to use it in our project. So how do we get it over? I'm going to go ahead and show and find the asset panel here and find what we want. Let's say I want this item right here. If we click on it, we can find in our world outliner, it's this item. In our details panel, we can find it's a stacked mesh with some materials. Next to the stacked mesh is a glass. We can click on this eyeglass and it will jump to it inside of our content panel. Now we can right click this item, go to Asset Actions, Migrate, and it's going to find that item, which is the stacked mesh, and anything else associated with it. So in this case, all the materials that are used to make it up. It's going to say, hey, do you want to move these over? We could say, hey, yes, we do. Where? We're going to point it to the project we want to put it in. So in this case, our first project, and then you want the content folder. The content folder is where all the content is stored in our project. If we hit select folder, it's going to try to do it, and it's going to say, hey, it was migrated successfully. But let's say you want more. So for our project, and to continue on from here, we're going to actually want this entire map and everything inside of it. So let's find the map. On the top left, we can see on this tab, it's called Learning Kit _Games _Showcase. But how do we find it in here? Well, if we go to our content folder, we can type in under the search content at the top, learning, and it's going to search for anything with that name. And we can find right here, Learning Kit Games Showcase Level. Alternately, let's remove this text to filter from. We can use a filter. We'll go to Filters, and we want Level. And it's going to show us all of the levels inside of our folder that we've selected. In this case, we're going to right-click on the Learning Kit Game Showcase, Asset Actions, Migrate. Now you notice we have a lot more files that we're going to migrate because we're getting all the items in here and the level set up. Hit OK. Again, point it to our first project, content folder, and select it. It will give us a message saying, hey, you already got something there with the same name. Are you sure you want to overwrite it? In this case, we do, because earlier we brought over one of the meshes, and it's just saying, hey, you're going to replace it. Yes to all. It'll migrate it over. And at this point, we can close down the learning kit since we no longer need it. If we go back into our project that we created, our first project, I'm going to minimize some of these folders so we can look at them easier. We can now see we have a folder called Learning Kit Games, Maps, and we have that showcase map. If we were to go into it, it's going to load it up. It may need to compile shaders again because we're in a new project, but as soon as that's done, you'll have everything loaded and ready to go. Now that we have this map imported, the last way we can bring in items to our project is the import option. This will be where we can bring in items created from outside of Unreal Engine, such as maybe a 3D creation software. Now, the easiest way is I'm going to go to my content folder and go to my root, so we have everything underneath it. And if you open up in your file browser where these are at, you can simply drag and drop them. So here's a WAV file for music. I can drag and drop, and it'll bring it in as a sound WAV file. Alternately, you can right-click and choose Import to Game, or add Import on the top left, Import to Game, and those will bring the files in. You can bring in more than one file at once. For example, I'm going to select both of these files and bring them in. Some files have extra import options, such as these static meshes, and they have different settings you can set up to adjust them. But we'll go ahead and import, and now we can find we have a few things created that we've brought in from somewhere else that are useful for our project. At this point, we've navigated around our project. We've added some content from a third party. We've migrated some things in. But let's start working on making our own new level so we can see how everything goes together. Inside of our content browser, let's go ahead and click on content. We'll right click and create a new folder. And we'll type this one levels. Inside of our levels folder, let's make a new level. Well, how do we do that? We can go to File, New Level. It's going to ask us to pick a level from one of our templates, including an empty one. Or we can right click and choose Level, which is what we're going to do. Name this one Test Level. And you can press Enter or double click to open it up. In this case, it's going to ask us if we want to save our test level. Since it just created it, we'll save it. And now we have a new blank level. And it is truly blank. If we look at the route outliner, we have nothing. We have no lights, we have no meshes. So how do we start filling it up? Well, let's add a few meshes. Let's use our content browser to find a floor and add it to our scene. We can search for floor, and we're going to go ahead and find a few things. Well, in this case, we're not, because we are in our levels folder. It needs to search through the main folder and everything below it. If we click on content now you'll find all of our different floors. But some of these aren't what we want. Some of these are materials, which go on meshes, and textures, which are part of materials. We want just the stacked meshes. Well, we can use our filter. We'll click on filters. We'll go up to stacked meshes. And now we have all of the stacked meshes that are of type floor. You can click on the filter to disable it or right click it to remove it. In this case, I want this floor, sm_kit_floor. If we look at the path,